You are 22 years old. It is June 1941, and the world you knew is gone. 3 weeks ago you were a factory worker in Minsk. You had a mother, a younger sister, a job that paid enough to eat. Now you have a rifle, a uniform that doesn't fit, and orders you did not choose. The Soviet Union has just been invaded, not by a small force, by 3.5 million German soldiers, the largest military invasion in the history of human warfare. And you are one of the men being sent to stop them. Most of you will not survive. You don't know that yet, but the statistics are not kind. Of the approximately 34 million Soviet men who served during the Second World War, approximately 8.7 million will die in combat. Millions more will die from wounds, disease, starvation, and the specific brutality of captivity. This is what it means to be a Soviet soldier in the Second World War, not the version of heroism that the Soviet state will later construct. The actual experience, the cold, the hunger, the specific terror of being sent forward by officers who are themselves afraid, not just of the Germans but of their own command. By the end of this, you will understand what that experience actually was. The first thing you need to understand is who is behind you, not the Germans, your own side. On July 28, 1942, Joseph Stalin issues Order No. 227. Its informal name is not One Step Back. The order is explicit. Units that retreat without authorization will be considered traitors to the motherland. Officers who permit unauthorized retreat face immediate arrest. And to enforce this, blocking detachments are created. Units of NKVD soldiers, the Soviet secret police, positioned behind the front lines, with orders to shoot any Soviet soldier who retreats without orders. You are not fighting in one direction. You are trapped between two armies. The Germans in front of you, your own state behind you. This is the reality that Soviet war films do not show, that the official history of the Great Patriotic War carefully does not mention. But it is documented. The orders are in the archives. The testimony of survivors is consistent and detailed. Approximately 158,000 Soviet soldiers are executed by their own side during the war, more than some countries lost in their entire participation in the conflict. You know this, every Soviet soldier knows this, and you go forward anyway, because forward at least there is a chance. The penal battalions. If you have committed an offense, real or accused, you may be assigned to a Strafbat, a punishment battalion. These units are sent on the most dangerous missions, mine-clearing operations, direct assaults on fortified positions, the operations that the regular army won't survive. In a penal battalion, you have one path back to the regular army, blood atonement. You are wounded in combat. Your offense is considered expiated by your blood. You return to a regular unit. The men in penal battalions are not all criminals. Many are officers who failed to hold a position, soldiers who retreated when their unit was overrun, men who said something that someone reported. The definition of offense in Stalin's army is broad and unpredictable enough that almost anyone can find themselves here. Former officers serve as common soldiers. Educated men serve alongside genuine criminals. The shared experience of being considered expendable is the only equalizer. The casualty rates in penal units are documented at several times higher than regular infantry. You are not expected to survive. You are expected to be useful in dying. The winter. Nothing in your previous life has prepared you for this. The winter of 1941 to 1942 on the Eastern Front reaches -40 degrees Celsius in some areas. German soldiers, many of whom arrived in summer uniforms, freeze in large numbers. Soviet soldiers have better cold weather equipment. But better is a relative term on the Eastern Front in 1941. Your boots are not waterproof. Your coat is not warm enough for temperatures this low. Your rations, already insufficient, are harder to distribute when supply lines freeze. Frostbite takes fingers, takes toes, takes the faces of men who fall asleep in the wrong position. The experienced soldiers sleep in groups, share body heat, never let a comrade sleep alone in the open. The inexperienced soldiers learn this or they don't. The ones who don't learn it don't survive to learn anything else. You are hungry, almost always. The official daily ration for a Soviet frontline soldier in 1941 is 800 grams of bread, meat, fat, and sugar combined. The official ration is rarely delivered in full. Supply convoys are bombed. Roads are destroyed. The organizational chaos of the early war makes the movement of food to the front a challenge that kills men as surely as German bullets. You eat what you can find. Sometimes that is nothing. Stalingrad. If you survive long enough to reach the summer of 1942, you may find yourself in Stalingrad. The Battle of Stalingrad runs from August 1942 to February 1943. It is not a battle in any conventional sense. It is a destruction of a city, of the men sent to defend it. of every idea about what war looks like that either side brought with them. The city is rubble by the time the serious fighting begins. Soviet defenders hold the west bank of the Volga River. The Germans advance block by block, building by building, room by room. The life expectancy of a newly arrived Soviet soldier in Stalingrad in September 1942 is documented at approximately 1 day. 1 day. You step off the boat at night, because crossing the Volga in daylight means being sunk. And you have, statistically, until approximately the following evening. The tactics that emerge from this environment are unlike anything in military history. Vasily Chukov, the Soviet commander of the 62nd Army defending Stalingrad, develops what he calls the hugging tactic. Hold the front line so close to the German positions that German air support and artillery cannot fire without hitting their own men. Force the fight into buildings, into sewers, into rooms where numerical and technological superiority matters less. This works. It costs an extraordinary price. Stalingrad produces more Soviet casualties than the United States suffered in the entire Second World War. In one battle, in one city, over 6 months. You fight in the ruins. You fight in the barricade factory, in the Red October factory, in the grain elevator, which changes hands multiple times in a single week. There are snipers on every high point. You learn to move in specific ways, to cross open ground at specific times, to never cross the same road twice. The city teaches you this or it kills you. The men who survive Stalingrad are different from the men who entered it. Not harder. Something more specific than hard. They have made a peace with their own death that cannot be undone when the battle ends. Veterans of Stalingrad are sent, after the battle, to other sectors of the front. Their presence changes units. Not because of anything they teach, because of what they are. Men who have already died in some sense, and decided to keep fighting anyway. Liberation. The war turns. After Stalingrad, after Kursk, the largest tank battle in history in the summer of 1943, the Red Army begins to advance. This is when many people assume the Soviet soldiers' experience improves. It does not entirely. Advancing is different from defending, but war is still war. As the Red Army moves westward, through Ukraine, through Poland, through the eastern territories of the Reich, the things they find change them. Babi Yar, Majdanek, the evidence, in site after site, of what the German occupation has done to the populations of the occupied territories. The Soviet soldiers who enter these sites do not write memoirs immediately. Many do not write memoirs at all. The Soviet state controls what veterans are permitted to say about their experiences, and the full account of what the Red Army witnessed in liberation is suppressed for decades. But it is there, in the archives, in the testimonies collected after the war, in the accounts of men who saw things that no previous experience of human life had given them the framework to understand. Berlin, May 1945. The Reichstag building, the signatures on the walls. Soviet soldiers who reach Berlin write their names on the walls of the Reichstag. Thousands of signatures. A specific, human act of marking that they were here, that they survived. You survived. If you did, the majority of the men who entered the Soviet army in 1941 did not reach Berlin, did not reach anywhere. They are in the ground of Ukraine and Russia and Belarus, in mass graves that were documented in some cases and in others simply forgotten, in the territory over which the war moved twice, German advance, Soviet liberation, leaving the dead in layers. And if you did survive, you return to a country that has lost approximately 27 million people. 27 million. The number is so large that it resists comprehension. Every family in the Soviet Union has lost someone. Most families have lost many. The country you return to is the same country and a completely different country. You are the same person and a completely different person. The war has taken 4 years of your life. 4 years of the best physical years a human body has. And you are one of the ones it gave back. You are 22 years old. That is where we started. And if you survived, if the statistics broke in your favor through some combination of skill and luck, and the specific contingency of which unit you were assigned to on which day, you are now 26, or 27, or 28, and the world you are returning to has almost nothing in common with the one you left. The Soviet state will tell you that you won the Great Patriotic War. This is true. The Soviet state will build monuments and hold parades and construct a narrative of heroism that makes the experience you actually had into something cleaner and more usable. This is also true, and somewhere between those two truths is the actual experience. The cold, the hunger, the NKVD behind you, the penal battalions, the 1-day life expectancy in Stalingrad, the things you saw in the liberated territories, The bodies of the men who went into the same fights you did and did not come out. That is what you carry home. Not in the official history. In yourself. The monuments are for the nation. What happened is yours. If understanding what history actually felt like, from the inside at the level of individual experience, matters to you, subscribe. No mythology. No easy heroism. Just the documented reality, explained as honestly as the evidence allows. Hit subscribe. There is one more reality that must be named before this ends. The Soviet soldier who survived did not always return to safety. The NKVD, the same organization whose blocking detachments stood behind the front lines, was waiting at the homecoming too. Soviet soldiers who had been captured as prisoners of war faced a specific suspicion upon return. Stalin's order was explicit and documented. A Soviet soldier who allowed himself to be captured was considered either a coward or a traitor. The distinction between a man who was wounded and captured and a man who surrendered willingly was not reliably made. Approximately 1.8 million Soviet soldiers returned from German captivity at the end of the war. A significant portion of them went not home. They went to filtration camps, interrogation, investigation of whether their capture was legitimate. Some were released, some were sent to the Gulag, some were executed. The man who survived 4 years of the most brutal war in human history. Who was captured? Who survived captivity in the German system, where Soviet prisoners died at rates far exceeding those of Western Allied prisoners, where conditions were deliberately lethal? Who lived through that? Who came home and was arrested by his own country for having been captured? This is documented. The numbers are in the archives. The testimonies of survivors are consistent. The war was not finished for these men when Germany surrendered. It continued, in a different form, on different ground, against a different enemy, but with the same essential feature. They had no choice in any of it. Not the draft, not the front they were assigned to, not the capture they survived, not the filtration camp that greeted them at the end. The Soviet state constructed a memory of the Second World War that had no place for this. The veterans who passed through filtration were not permitted to discuss it. The record was classified. The full account of what the Soviet Union did to its own returning soldiers after the war did not begin to emerge until the Soviet archives started opening in the late 1980s and 1990s. By then, most of the men who could have told you what it felt like were already dead. What remains is the documents. And the specific, quiet truth that the war was not the same experience for everyone who survived it. For some, it ended in May 1945. For others, it ended years later, in a labor camp, in a rehabilitation process, in the slow, uncertain work of rebuilding a life in a country that had treated your survival as suspicious. That is the full picture. Not the monuments, the full picture.